Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is opening a drink. Maybe that's you. Maybe it was 20 minutes ago. Maybe you're planning on it, and you have absolutely no idea how old that impulse actually is. Not thousands of years old, not tens of thousands. We're talking about 10 million years ago, before humans existed, when a small primate in an African forest reached down, picked up a piece of fruit that had been sitting on the ground for a few days too long, and ate it. The fruit had started to ferment. The ethanol inside it made the primate feel strange and warm and good. It had no idea what just happened. It came back for more. And in that one moment, on a forest floor, before language, before fire, before any recognizable version of civilization, the relationship between your species and alcohol began. Here's what's wild. In 2014, a biologist at UC Berkeley named Matthew Kerrigan sequenced the alcohol processing genes of our ancient primate ancestors. He found that roughly 10 million years ago, those genes mutated, dramatically increasing our ability to metabolize ethanol, not by accident, by selection. Which means the primates that could handle fermented fruit better survived more, found more food, passed on the trait. Your ability to process alcohol isn't a bug in your biology. It's a feature that was selected over millions of years because fermented fruit was a reliable food source, and your ancestors were better at finding it by following its smell and eating it without dying. We didn't develop a taste for alcohol. We evolved one. Now, when did we figure out how to make it on purpose? In 2018, archaeologists were excavating a cave near Haifa, Israel. The cave is called Raqefet. It was used by a group called the Natufians, roughly 13,000 years ago. Inside, they found stone mortars carved directly into the bedrock floor. When they analyzed the residue left in those mortars, they found traces of wheat and barley that had been soaked, germinated, and left to ferment. That's beer, brewed in a cave 13,000 years ago. Here's the part that changes everything. The Natufians were not farmers. They hadn't invented agriculture yet. They were still hunting animals and collecting wild grain by hand. They didn't grow the barley. They found it. And the first thing they did with it, before bread, before storage, before anything else, was make beer. For decades, the accepted timeline looked like this. Humans settled down, started farming, built villages, and then eventually figured out fermentation. Alcohol came after civilization. Raqefet turned that timeline upside down. Because these people were brewing while they were still nomadic, and they weren't the only ones. At a site called Göbekli Tepe, massive stone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, were arranged in precise circles and carved with detailed animal imagery, deliberate, complex, built before farming, before pottery, built by hunter-gatherers who had no permanent home. For years, nobody could explain it. What would motivate nomadic people to organize the labor required to move 10-ton stones up a hill and carve them with precision? Then, they found large stone vats buried at the site. Chemical analysis confirmed fermented grain inside. People weren't just passing through Göbekli Tepe. They were gathering there from across the region to drink together. And this leads to one of the most genuinely controversial ideas in archaeology. An archaeobotanist named Patrick McGovern, the leading expert on ancient alcohol on the planet, has spent decades arguing something that still makes some historians uncomfortable. Humans didn't start farming to make bread. They started farming to make beer. And here's why that argument is harder to dismiss than it sounds. Bread is complicated. You grind, you knead, you bake, you time it correctly. It requires sustained effort and specific knowledge. Beer, in its most primitive form, is simpler. You soak grain in water, leave it, and fermentation happens by itself. The yeast does the work. If you wanted to guarantee a supply of fermented grain, the most logical solution is to grow the grain yourself. If McGovern is right, alcohol isn't something that came after civilization. It might be why civilization started. By 7,000 years before the modern era, the evidence becomes almost modern in its sophistication. In a Neolithic village called Jiahu in central China, archaeologists found pottery jars containing residue from a drink made of rice, honey, wild grapes, and hawthorn berries. Chemical analysis confirmed both the ingredients and the fermentation. This is the oldest confirmed recipe for an alcoholic drink anywhere in the world. And it wasn't crude, it was a blend. Multiple ingredients deliberately chosen and combined by someone who clearly knew exactly what they were doing.
By the time ancient Egypt came around, alcohol had stopped being a discovery and become infrastructure. Workers who built the pyramids were paid in beer, not coins, not grain. Beer, roughly 4 to 5 liters a day per worker. This wasn't generosity, it was practicality. Water from the Nile was often contaminated. Beer, because of the brewing process, was safer to drink. It also packed additional calories that workers dragging limestone blocks in desert heat desperately needed. Beer was simultaneously a paycheck, a water filter, a meal supplement, and, because the Egyptians believed it was a gift from the god Osiris, a religious act. So here's the actual timeline. 10 million years ago, your ancestors evolved to find and process fermented fruit. 13,000 years ago, they were deliberately brewing in caves before they learned to farm. 12,000 years ago, they may have built the first monument in human history, specifically as a place to gather and drink. 9,000 years ago, they had recipes with multiple ingredients. 5,000 years ago, entire civilizations were running on it. Next time you open a drink, you're continuing something that started before your species had a name for itself. The container changed, the ingredients improved, the social ritual evolved. But the impulse to find fermented fruit, to share it, to gather around it, that impulse is 10 million years old. And it's yours. Drop your drink of choice in the comments. And if this changed how you think about what's in your glass, the next video will do exactly the same thing.